Hey, good day, everyone. It's Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV on the Digital Anarchist Network, and welcome to Friday, April 3rd on TechStrong TV. This represents a full week of our first week of TechStrong TV. We hope you've had a chance to catch some of the shows, and I hope that day by day you're seeing it improve as we kind of get our legs under us here. We are trying to bring you some good news, some tech news, some news that, hey, we may be working from home, but we're not stopped, and tech continues, including communication, collaboration, and what makes us strong, right? Which is developing code, deploying code, keeping us secure. And now more than ever, we're counting on technology to keep the wheels on as we are, working from home, in quarantine, or lockdown, or what have you. So thanks for joining us. You may be joining us on Roku or Apple TV or Amazon Fire TV using the DevOps.com application. You could be watching us on the DevOps.com mobile app on Android or iOS, or on the web at TechStrong.tv or DigitalAnarchist.live, as well as Facebook Live. DevOps TV on YouTube, the DevOps TV channel, that's all one word. LinkedIn Live as well. There's plenty of options to catch TechStrong TV. We come at you at 9:30 every day, but the on-demand version is available probably shortly after that. And on Roku, Amazon, Apple, it's available, I think, all the time. So there's no excuse why you can't get TechStrong TV from somewhere. Again, if this is your first time joining, we try to bring you a good mix of our video library, live news, and interesting information about what's going on out there. I know we're all looking forward to the weekend. Hopefully everyone will have a chance maybe to get out a little bit, still keep our social distance, but to get some fresh air and some sunshine. We have a lot lined up for today's show, so let's break to our first commercial. And we'll come back and get started with some good content.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Okay, we're back on TechStrong TV on the Digital Anarchist Network. Hey, everyone. Alan Schimmel here, and just looking at alerts because we never know what's coming in. I apologize. But, back in late January, we did one of our annual virtual conferences called Predict. This year, of course, it was Predict 2020. And in it, we had some experts running the gamut from technology executives, venture capitalists, analysts, practitioners, trying to, take a gaze into the crystal ball about what 2020 would hold for us from a DevOps, digital transformation, cyber, cloud native perspective. Interestingly, no one at that point saw this coronavirus COVID-19 event on the horizon. We can't see everything. Though Sid Cibrajani at GitLab did do a great presentation on working from home and why the organizations of tomorrow would be remote. We replayed that, I think it was Monday or Tuesday of this week. Go back and have a look. It really is a great presentation. Today, though, I wanted to give you another presentation from Predict 2020, and that was my own presentation that I did wrapping up Predict 2020, and it was entitled "The Builder Shall Inherit the Earth, the Democratization of IT." And in it, I laid out my thoughts on why we've entered a new era in technology and how we sell technology, how we market technology, how technology gets taken into the enterprise. And I first saw this happening with open source technology back in the mid 2000s, but it's exploded now, right? Where 98% of the Fortune 500 uses open source technology in some fashion. But more importantly, it's also who's the decision makers. It's so hard to get good developers, and they're demanding more than just more money. They want control over what tools they use. They want to be in the right kind of environment. They want to collaborate, so they want to be working with other good people. And so it's changed the way IT is being done, and the way IT is being consumed, and the way IT is being sold. So we broken my presentation here into two parts. I hope you'll enjoy it. It's The Builder Shall Inherit the Earth. Have a look. Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel, CEO, founder of Media Ops, and I'm really happy to be presenting today a Predict 2020 with what I think is the big story for the coming year. And actually, this is a story I've been writing about for the last 3 or 4, maybe 5 months. I call it the democratization of IT, and it's about how the builders shall inherit the earth. Let me jump right into this here, because I think this is really something you need. Whether you're a technology vendor or a builder, and I'll explain what I mean by a builder, you need to understand how the world has changed and how it is changing and what this means for you in 2020. So first of all, let me talk a little bit about days gone by, right? It's no secret. You're looking at me. I'm not 25 years old. As a matter of fact, I've been in the IT business for almost 30 years. Maybe more. And I've seen a lot of water under that bridge in 30 years. I've seen a lot of things change. When I first got involved in technology, and I was a founder of some venture-backed companies and so forth, it was about selling to the C-suite, right? Lead generation, sales cycles. It was all about getting to that executive, taking them out for the 2 or 3 martini lunch, playing golf, because it was almost always men, playing golf with them, going out to the steakhouse for dinner and showing them, why they need to invest in your product. And like this little cartoon says here, they really, a lot of times, they paid no attention to innovation or to women or to many other things, because it was a good old boys network, and it was the way it was done. Right? Sales processes. This is a typical chart of a sales process. Sales process stretched out 6 months to a year to make that quote unquote enterprise sale. And there were silos within silos of how we did this. And it was such a long, drawn out process. But the funny thing is, it never concerned the people who are actually going to use the tools. The builders, whether they be the software developers or the ops people or the QA people or the cybersecurity folks. They didn't sign the check. They weren't the decision makers, and they were relatively ignored in this whole process. Instead, we would make up calculators showing the ROI and the TOS, right? And total cost of ownership and TOCs and all of these kinds of things that really, it didn't even speak to the technology. It spoke to the finance, right? Selling technology solutions was seen as a financial decision. And the reason was technology was not considered an amplifier of profits. It was considered a cost center. And so no wonder when you have it considered as a cost center, you're concerned with ROI, total cost of ownership, and really the decisions get made in the financial department rather than in the information technology department. And that changed gradually over the years, but in the last 5 years, we've had a revolution, right? We are no longer selling, for the most part, to the CFO for the information technology solutions. We're not even selling to the C-suite, right? We are seeing innovation like we've never seen before. We're seeing adoption and acceleration like we've never seen before. And it's no coincidence that these developments within development have coincided with the rise of a few key technologies that I think are really kind of the force multipliers behind it. One of the key things, though, and I've heard this from customer after customer that we deal with here at MediaOps, as well as speaking to hundreds, if not thousands, of practitioners at the various conferences we attend, and that is customer delight. Today's companies want to deliver delight to their customers. And delight can be many different things. It could be a great product, it could be great support, great service, it could be any or all of them. But that's what it's about when we talk about what is a successful provider doing today. Of course, probably the single biggest thing that's driving this is the open source software model, right? Open source has made software free and available to everyone. It is the great democracy maker, the great democratization of what we're seeing in IT. We're seeing everyone being able to use software for free. Not only being able to use software, but open source being the preferred model of using software, right? And there's two things driving when we talk about open source software, and it's been like this since the beginning of open source software. You know, I don't know how much you out there know about the history of open source, but certainly you've heard of, I hope, of Dr. Richard Stallman, who was kind of the guru behind the original real open source software thing. And granted, Stallman had some very far out concepts of open source and freedom and all of that stuff. But there's something in this quote that I want you to really take to heart. And that is when we talk about open source software being free software, this is Stallman's quote, "It's a matter of liberty, not price. To understand the concept, you should think of free as in free speech, not as in free beer." Now, I don't necessarily agree with Richard Stallman on a lot of things. And I think the better way to put this is that when we talk about open source, there's two key concepts around free. There's free as in software, there's free as in beer, and then there's free as in freedom. But one is not mutually exclusive of the other. And they're both key drivers, I think, in the adoption of the modern software movement. What do I mean by the modern software movement? Well, in my mind, we've had three distinct errors in the modern, in open source software. That first era was ushered in by people like Richard Stallman, but it was also, I think, captured best for me by the book and the series of essays called The Cathedral and the Bazaar by Eric S. Raymond that really talked about the ideas and principles behind open source versus proprietary and et cetera. And I was able to grab this slide courtesy of the web, and I want to give full credit to it. But it really kind of talks to the real guts of what that Cathedral and Bazaar era was, right? We really got hung up on what language, what licenses were the right licenses to use. How can one distribute open source software? How does one modify open source software? Does making a modification to open source software mean everyone gets that modification? Or is it just for you? What are the reuse implications of it? We lived through those days. There were some wars. I've got some t-shirts and scarves to prove it. But nevertheless, open source persevered, and it moved into the next era of open source software. And the next era of open source software I call the Big Brother era of open source, right? And in this, we saw open source projects that were managed, contributed to, supported truly by a community. It was grassroots at the very meaning of the grassroots level. Well, now with Big Brother, all of a sudden, almost every open source project of distinction, of importance, wound up being owned, lock, stock, and barrel, managed, or really run by some big corporation. And many times these big corporations had really benevolent type of ideas and notions on how to manage that open source software. But at the end of the day, make no mistake, they managed that open source software project for their own enrichment, right? It was about them being able to sell more product. It was about their profits. It was about doing what was best for that single corporation. And in that model, if you're another vendor, another provider, another developer who doesn't work for that corporation, you're hesitant to contribute to that project because whatever you're contributing is going back to the benefit of someone who may be a competitor, of someone who you may have no affiliation with, and you don't really want to line their corporate pockets with more money. And you know what? This was the state of open source for much of the early 2000s, I would say through 2000, maybe 12, 13, or 14. And in spite of it, open source still thrived. In spite of it, open source still persevered. But I'm really happy to say that at this point, we've reached the foundational era of open source. And as you can tell from these pictures behind me, I'm a big Isaac Asimov fan, and I thought the Foundation series was one of the best science fiction series ever. But that being said, when I talk about the foundational era of open source, I'm talking about a very different model for open source. No one company owns a particular open source project. We've started these not-for-profit organizations or foundations that manage these open source projects for the good of all, for the good of the whole community, so that vendor A and vendor B can both be parts of the foundation. They both contribute to the code and the betterment of the open source project, and everyone benefits as a result. Companies are not distinguished by who owns what open source project. Companies are distinguished by what they do with that open source software to make their product more valuable to you, the builder. And again, let me emphasize what I mean by builders. It's not just software developers. We're all coding today. We're all building. So I don't care whether you're developing applications, you're testing code, you are a cybersecurity person, you're a QA person, you're a person who's setting up Kubernetes infrastructure in software-defined networks or on containers or in serverless or what have you. If you're building the web work, the framework of today's technology foundations, you're a builder. And really, and this is really about you, right? Because as I'm going to get into next, the builders have inherited the earth here. But nevertheless, the foundational era of open source, I think, has really ushered in just a tremendous golden age of open source like we've never seen before. Right? And it really is thanks to organizations such as the Linux Foundation, the Cloud Foundry Foundation, the Eclipse Foundation, Apache Foundation, to name just a few. There's more. But these open source or not-for-profit foundations that are managing these open source communities and projects have allowed us all to benefit as well as all contribute into making these open source software projects so valuable and so much better than they ever were before. So again, we're in the foundational era of open source. That's only growing as we see. If any of you have been to KubeCon or any of the Linux Foundation shows, you see for yourself just really how big open source has become. And you know, we've seen studies here at Media Ops where upwards of 80% of all the code inside of most applications today are actually open source components.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey everyone, we're back here on TechStrong TV. I hope you liked part one of my Builders Shall Inherit the Earth presentation. Let's jump back in now to part two and wrap it up, and I'll be back after that. So, as I mentioned before, the builders have inherited the earth. And it's not why, right? I already defined who the builders are. But why have the builders inherited the earth? And in my mind, there's a couple of great reasons why this is true. Number one, the skills you have today, if you're one of the builders I'm talking about out there, the skills you have today are in such high demand that, frankly, they can't pay you enough money for your jobs, right? I'm sure if you're out there, you're getting calls every single day from headhunters and executive searchers and recruiters offering you your next job at 20, 30% or more raises. It's gotten to the point where most organizations today recognize they can't, it's not just the money that's going to keep you there. They can't make you stay somewhere where you're not working with the tools you want to work with, you don't have the environment and culture you want to work with, you don't have the team you want to work with. And if they can't provide you all those three things, they can't pay you enough money to stay where you are. The pyramid has turned upside down. Those people at the C level are no longer deciding where you should work, what you should work with, and who you should work with. You are deciding that. And that power, I mean, that's an awesome amount of power to have. And I've heard this from CIOs, CTOs, CEOs, VPs, directors, as well as practitioners. You ask them who picks the tools that your developers are working with. Excuse me. Who picks the testing software that you're using to test your software with? What security tools are you using, and who chooses them? Is it the CISO? Is it the CIO, the CTO? No, it's you, the builders, who are choosing what tools you want to work with. You're choosing what environment you want to build in. You're choosing what culture you want to work within an organization. You're choosing what teammates you want to, the kind of team you want to work in. And that's an awesome thing, and it's changed the entire game on its head, right? The whole business model has changed. Where before we were hiring enterprise class salespeople and sales engineers, and we would do these ROI calculators and total cost of ownerships and so forth. Now, that's not the business model, right? There's the old business model out here. That's not what we're seeing anymore. This whole thing has turned upside down on its side. We're now, as a technology tool vendor, if you're watching this, you probably already know this. You're selling from the bottom up. You're selling from the middle out. You still have to go up top, but that's usually at the end. The CIO or CTO or even the CISO is not going to choose what tool his team or her team is going to use without that team signing off on it. They're the ones who are using these tools and bringing it up into the organization, right? And that actually mimics, I remember when open source first came into the enterprise, right? It didn't come in through the top. It came in through developers using Linux and other open source tools on their own machines. And then when they had a problem in work, they knew the open source project that could solve it, and they brought it in. They didn't get approval. At some point, someone freaked out and decided, what should we do with the license? And what can we do about open source licensing? And there's been a whole cottage, more than a cottage industry of companies that have come up to help manage open source licenses. But that way into the organization, into the enterprise, has been blown up and expanded, and that now is the new normal. Going forward in 2020 and beyond, that's the new normal. So how has this manifested itself? I see it, right? We see it at KubeCon and DevOps Enterprise Summit and Jenkins World, DevOps World, and so many other conferences. You don't see the sales guy, that enterprise sales guy who dresses in the nice suit and is tagged along with his sales engineer, trying to go break in and sell software. Today, the companies that are successful, the companies that are big in this market, right? DevOps, digital transformation, cyber, cloud native. They're not hiring salespeople as much as they're hiring dev relations, DevRel. Developer relations has become a thing. Any company that doesn't have and is selling software development tools and doesn't have a developer relations department is a dinosaur, right? You shouldn't be, I don't think you should do business with them. And if you're not just selling into software developers, but you're selling to other parts of the IT stack, you need community relations who are dealing with your open source users there, right? Evangelists. Every company today seems to have an evangelist because at the end of the day, they're not selling these tools or services or software to you over martinis at lunch or out on the fourth hole of a golf course. They're selling it to you, the builder, and they know they can't sell it to you. All they can do is put it in your hands and hope that it delivers delight. And if it does, they know that you will then take it up the chain. So this is where the new sale is, right? When we here at Media Ops, I'll often get on, I don't do the sales, but they'll ask me to get on a call with an agency or a technology provider, and they'll ask, we want leads. We want leads of key decision makers. We want C-level people and VPs. I usually just pass them off the phone as fast as I can because I know those people don't understand the people that we speak to. They don't understand you out there. It's not about that C-level person anymore. The C-level person's the last person who signs off on these software adoptions or technology tool adoptions. It's you, the builders, do. And so for any of my vendor friends out here watching this, make sure you're investing in DevRel, in community relations, in evangelists, in content marketing. The people you now have to reach don't click on banners. They don't like hardcore sales. They like to be educated. So to me now, this is the new mantra, right? And this is the new way to do sales. This is the new way to get technology tools into the market, up into the tool chain. And it's, you make a great product. You deliver it usually as a service, which means there's some sort of reoccurring aspect to it, whether it be SaaS or something else. You get your software or product or service into people's hands. You let them use it for free. If you think you're going to charge people up front to get it into their hands, you're going to have a hard time in this market. Once it's in their hands, it's up to you to deliver delight. What do I mean by that? They have to love you, your company, and your product. It has to work. If it doesn't work, you better tell them why it's not working and how you're fixing it. Your company support has to be on time. Your whole message has to be right. It can't be that hard sell, right? People, our audience at DevOps and Container Journal and Security Boulevard, they know what they want. Let them try the software. If they like it, they'll call you. Don't be reaching out to them and hounding them, because none of us in 2020 want to be spammed with email that we don't like. And then finally, if you do all of these things, the builders will get their companies to buy it. They become your biggest advocates. They become your technical champions. They're the reason why you will have a new customer. So 2020 and beyond, what's my advice to you? Here's the new mantra. Take it, use it, believe it, succeed with it. So I want to hammer this home to you so you understand. What does this mean for 2020? I'm talking to you, the developer, the DevOps person, the SRE, the cybersecurity person, the QA, the person working on Kubernetes and containers and Dockers and serverless. You have the power. Kind of like the cartoon when I was younger. You have the power. You have the power to choose where you want to work, what you want to work with, who you want to work with, and in what kind of environment you want to work. It's an awesome power. It's an awesome responsibility. But going forward, that responsibility is going to bring a lot of other responsibilities with it. The success of the organizations you work for depends on your choices, right? And if you make a choice just because it's easy or you haven't really thought through the full implications of it, that organization's success or failure could very well depend on your decision. Not to put any pressure on you, but it will. So you've got to be cognizant of that when you're making these choices. It's not just willy-nilly picking up the next shiny trinket. For my vendor friends out there, if it's not open, it's not worth a damn. And by open, it should be free, but even if it's just open and with a free trial and you want to charge later, that's fine. But so many of my friends who are developers and technologists out there flat out say if it's not open, they don't even want to look at it. So you've got to embrace open. You've got to embrace open core. You've got to embrace open source. You've got to embrace free. You've got to make it open if you're going to take advantage and leverage this new reality. It's got to be free as in beer. I know Stallman really felt that free as in freedom, like as in free speech, was much more important than free as in beer. But the realities of economics never go away. And free as in beer, like free beer, is so important. So even if you're not truly open source and you have open core or whatever, if you have a free version that will allow you to get the software for free into the public's hands, you have a chance. It's imperative in your model today that you do this. So free beer. Free as in beer. Free beer is never a bad thing anyway. I'm just hammering home these things I've spoken about. Deliver delight, right? Once you're lucky enough to get your product service into one of the builders' hands, they don't have time for second chances. You've got to make sure that your product delivers delight. And not just the code alone, dealing with your company, interactions, the community, they've got to deliver delight. If you could do all those things, I think you're going to be successful in 2020 and beyond. And for my builder friends out there, you have the power, the choice is yours, the responsibility is yours. Wield it wisely, and we'll all have a better world as a result. This is Alan Schimmel for MediaOps. Enjoy the rest of the day. Go check out some of the sponsors in the expo halls, and we'll see you on our next session shortly. And just a quick reminder, in about a month, we'll have DevSecOps Day on our virtual platform. Register for that as well. Have a great day, everyone.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel and we're back. I hope you enjoyed that presentation from Predict. You know, all I think it was 14 or 16 presentations and sessions from Predict 2020 are still up on our virtual platform. If you go to Predict 2020, that's 2020.io, and you can register and you can watch. There's some great ones there. I mentioned the Sid Cibrajani one. There's also a great Charlie Betts from Forrester in presentation. Great session from my friend Emmett Keefe over at Insight Partners and Insight Ignite. Emmett does a great job. My friend Ming Gong from UST Global also does a really good job on laying out sort of the cloud transformation or digital transformation and cloud transformation process. He does, and of course Mitchell Ashley from Accelerated Strategies Group. There's more. Go check it out. There's some great panels. Again, predict2020.io. Next up, though, I want to bring you a video interview I did with Jason Clark, who's the Chief Strategy Officer at a company called Netskope. Netskope recently announced some news, but you know what? They are one of these cyber companies that are empowering remote workers, helping you with your transition to the cloud, to secure your cloud. I remember they work on, defining the new perimeter. And I remember being at RSA conference maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and there was all this talk of the deperimeterization of security, when at the time we were all about network security and moat and castle. And the Jericho folks were saying the perimeter's dead, and some people scoffed, including me. I'll admit it. But the perimeter, as we knew it then, is dead. We've gone through the micro perimeters and the new perimeter and the deperimeter, and Netskope is kind of helping define the new perimeter today, where we are remote working more than ever, certainly in present circumstances. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Jason Clark, Chief Strategy Officer of Netskope, and have a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel, CEO of Media Ops, Editor-in-Chief of DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, and Container Journal. Thanks for joining us on this video. It's an enhanced DevOps chat video version, and I'm happy to be joined by Jason Clark, who's the Chief Strategy Officer of Netskope. Jason, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here.
So, Jason, this is the first opportunity we've had to introduce Netskope to our audience, so I'm sure there are probably people in our audience who are certainly familiar with Netskope. But for those who haven't, why don't we start off with maybe a kind of a brief kind of background on Netskope, where you guys play, what you do?
Yeah. So, a few years back, our founder and CEO, Sanjay Barrick, started Netskope really with the vision of knowing that, in the end, most every company is going to cloud. And it's really transforming, the way that they do security, and specifically the perimeter security and data security. So the vision of the company is to redefine and reimagine the perimeter for every single company that we support. And that means network security, cloud security, and data security. And so we basically are taking every control you ever had on the perimeter and putting that in the cloud and letting that be delivered so that it's 15 milliseconds from every user in the world, but also right next to all your apps. So in the end, you get security everywhere, but you also get performance and user experience being significantly better, which normally doesn't go with security, getting both together.
Absolutely. And Jason, I always like to give our audience a little bit of flavor for who our guest is. And, Chief Strategy Officer can cover a lot of different sins. But why don't we, if you wouldn't mind, share your own personal journey with our audience and how you got to be at Netskope here today in this role.
Yeah, absolutely. I started in 17 years old in the U.S. Army, and right away, I was put into cybersecurity. So since I was 17 years old, which is now, 26 years of doing cybersecurity. That's all I've done my entire life. And so right after that, the only, when I got out of the military after 4 years, the only people hiring security was banks. So I started running security teams, which started out small, but then got bigger and bigger with bigger banks, and then went to be the CISO for the New York Times, first one there in 2007, then CISO for Emerson Electric. And then I shifted over to the technology side and kind of working with WebSense, now ForcePoint, as their Chief Strategy Officer and Chief Security Officer, and then helped create Optiv and was their Chief Strategy Officer and Chief Security Officer there, and now Netskope. And my job is, Chief Strategy Officer is, let's say, the main title. I also own either the security team, and the CISO, Lamont Orange, reports to me. And why that's important because I really need to have a true understanding and pulse of exactly what we're dealing with and what the bad guys are doing and what all of our customers are dealing with. And so I see the live or a lot of times before our customers or at the same time as our customers. And that, understanding their problem, that is the job of the chief strategy officer, is if I know the problem better than anybody else in the industry, and then I can direct our products and our services to meet the needs of our clients.
Absolutely. And of course, in today's world, with everything we're dealing with this virus and everything, the need for the kind of stuff that Netskope produces has probably never been more acute, right? So many people working from home remotely and stuff. And it's not just working remotely. Back in the day, we would work remotely, and then we would basically VPN into the office, right? So we had a drawbridge over the moat back into the castle. But today, working remotely is a very different thing, right? Because you're home, if you're home or wherever you are remote, right? And you remote in, but you're accessing applications that are in a public cloud, in a private cloud, a SaaS-based application where, frankly, you may not even realize where it's hosted. But it's not like everything's getting channeled back into the LAN, right? People are, just accessing the internet, and so, protecting enterprise organizations' assets in that kind of environment, especially now with everyone working remote, is a daunting task. Why not talk a little bit about how Netskope helps solve that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're in a very unprecedented time right now, and I think it is definitely stressing, a lot of small businesses specifically, and certainly families with kids not going to school and trying to manage these Zoom calls like this, right? With kids kind of popping in, and I think everybody just I think it's important to stay focused and just kind of embrace the situation and try to make the best of it. I think that as we look, I've talked this morning, I was texting with 3 different Fortune 100 CISOs, who all 3 of them are leading for their companies, really the response to this pandemic. And it's all about work from home. And really their teams, but also their infrastructure is being stressed. Their legacy or their on-prem, VPNs, can't handle 100% of their employees being home and coming in. So they can't just spin that up. Well, the time it takes to order new equipment and order that across the world.
And who's delivering it?
I mean, there's a lot of, there's a whole supply chain issue there versus, so they're, it's making their CEO, their boards, their CFO realize that they need to move faster off of on-prem stuff, right? It's not just VPN. This is for everything. And it's really kind of all of a sudden, it really is accelerating we should be using SaaS more. Companies are already realizing now that more than 50% of their internet traffic and more 50% of their apps actually is SaaS. It is cloud. So this is accelerating. It's already changing people's mindsets. I don't think, I'm seeing from security teams are being told, or they're telling their teams, look, no more on-prem stuff. We're not buying on-prem equipment anymore. Everything needs to be cloud delivered and cloud enabled. And ultimately, yes, Netskope will get a lot of tailwinds from that because of the fact that that's just the space that we're in, and that's what we enable.
Absolutely. And returning to Netskope, the company, I know you guys recently announced a round of finance. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Do you want to give details?
Yeah. So the focus around that is really just kind of accelerating, continuing the acceleration of the investments that we're making. I mean, the most important one of that is our network infrastructure that we're building. And so while we've got this great technology that's really what we call a next-gen secure web gateway, that's a cloud proxy, which we believe is really going to become the most important control point for all security teams going forward. It used to, if I asked CISOs 3 years ago, they would have said it's a firewall and AV. But because the stuff's not going through your firewall, you're not going to own the endpoint half the time anymore. these iPhones and your watch, right? I saw you kind of messaging on. The reality is that we don't have the control point anymore, so it's going to have to be a proxy. So to get that delivered, to all users in the world, and to be 15 milliseconds to all the users in the world, we need a network infrastructure to do that. So that's obviously has some initial capital outlay. So we're just accelerating the rapid expansion of that to complete this year. And also the second factor is we want to be independent, right? We want to be financially independent, to not have to make decisions because of a round, or because we're publicly traded at the moment. Right? We want to be able to stay hyper focused on building the very best infrastructure and security technology we can for our customers for the long duration.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing we've learned with companies, who are looking to help secure cloud, and whether it be a company like Akamai or Cloudflare or even Zscaler, right? I remember talking to Jay Chowdhury 5, 6, 7 years ago about this very issue. To be 15 milliseconds away from everyone just takes a tremendous amount of infrastructure, right? It's almost akin to like how Amazon, right? For so many years, Jeff Bezos just funneled the profits, the revenue, back into building out that distribution, right? The distribution capabilities that today allow Amazon to replace FedEx or UPS with their own delivery team and so forth. And so I could see where that is part of it. But part of the next gen thing, though, too, has to be how do we learn from those guys who frankly, I'm not saying they're dinosaurs, because they're not, but you learn from their past experiences to do better. And that, I guess, is part of the premise here of Netskope, right? Is building that next gen.
Yeah. To add to that, I mean, you mentioned Amazon. Our the leader who is building out all of our infrastructure. He ran the network and the infrastructure for AWS. So that's Joe DiPaolo, and he came over from Amazon to build this for us as well. So and he's hired a lot of the very smartest people in the space that we can find, which aren't the easiest ones to find, that have been there, done that, and so that's that is how we kind of learn from the lessons of the past. And also, we do have a benefit that unlike, let's say, Zscaler, we weren't invented 10 years ago, right? So the way you coded and built applications 10 years ago, and the way the world was 10 years ago, was a very web-based, URL-focused world. Whereas today, it is all about cloud. And the way that you secure web was keep bad guys out. With the web there's bad guys on the web. Let's stop them from getting on our infrastructure. That's really how all the other secure web gateways were built, firewalls were built, was keep bad guys out, keep good stuff in. The reality is now what we've been built on is good stuff has to go out. In fact, we want it to go out because that enables the business. So how do we let it go out securely? And in realizing that it's not just about URLs and HTTP anymore, that the cloud is all about how do I have the same controls that when I had an on-prem server and app sitting next to my desk, and I could control every click the user did, and I had every log. A SaaS app, you don't have all that control. So you have to be, our invention is to be able to give you the ability to control everything that the user does and have the context of what's happening with your data. What instance are they using? Are they using let's say that my company enables box.com. Well, the problem is all other secure web gateways and firewalls only can see that you're allowing box, the URL, or Dropbox. But what if my user logs in and he logs in with his home account, but the URL is the same? So all of a sudden, I'm allowed to go to my home account and I can upload whatever data I want. So that's a really simple example of how cloud, is basically API JSON code is the new language of the internet, right? Which is API, yeah. And every app is built for that. And that's the problem is every security team is going blind. That's an example of the innovation that's needed. Is all security teams need to realize that more than 50% of their traffic is actually talking JSON, while they're still talking network security, which is layer 1 through 7, HTTP, and all the way down to TCP. Well, that's not actually.
No, I hear you. It's funny because I'm in security 20 years, And for 15 of those years, network security was the king, right? It was all. Then it started shifting to AppSec, right? We started seeing AppSec happening, and if it wasn't AppSec, it wasn't, important. But I think now we're seeing, you want to call it cloud security, call it cloud security. I mean, but accessing SaaS-based apps, just the use case we started off with, people working from wherever, on whatever, accessing wherever in a secure way. And how do we do that? And that's the challenge that Netskope is facing, or is helping us.
Exactly. I mean,
deal with.
You want security to be invisible. I mean, you want it to be transparent to the user. You just want them secured. And so the users shouldn't have to know, oh, for this internal app, I need to load up my VPN client and log back into the inside of the company. But to go to Salesforce, I just type in the URL. They should just be able to go to the apps and go to the URLs, and there should be something that's instinctually understanding how to protect them based on where they're going. And if that's a VPN back into the company, then let's light up that tunnel. VPN shouldn't be ACL based. They shouldn't be, that is port protocol. I mean, everything's 443 now. Everything is SSL. Yeah. But we're still living in this, port protocol world, but 95% of the traffic is SSL. So, it's just be transparent to the user, realizing it's about user security, right? So we need to move the security close to the user. It's about data security, and it's about app security. It's not really network security anymore, because everything's just app-based, user-based, but it has to have the context of data.
Absolutely, and data is paramount. Jason, we're about out of time. I know this went incredibly quick, but this is what happens when you start talking shop like this. Thanks for joining us. We continued success with Netskope. Hopefully we can have you back on here soon, maybe when some of this virus stuff, comes under control a bit, and we could dive deeper into some good topics. Good?
Thank you. Absolutely. Let's hope everybody, stays safe for the next month, and look to be back.
I hope so too. Jason Clark, Chief Strategy Officer for Netskope, here on DevOps Chat. This is Alan Schimmel. Thanks for joining us on this special video edition of DevOps Chat. We'll see you real soon, everyone. Stay well. Hey everyone, back here on the set at TechStrong TV. I wanted to just cover some of the timely news that we have up on the Media Ops site as well as outside of Media Ops. Just a quick rundown. If you get a chance, all of the stuff I'm going to talk about is up online. You should go check it out. And I'm only giving a small sampling. As I said before, there's tremendous amount of content being published. I know on Media Ops, on our DevOps.com Container Journal and Security Boulevard site, we're publishing a tremendous amount of material every day. And have a look at it if you'd like. There's something there probably for everyone. But let me hit a couple of big ones. Number one is on the issue of what we call telehealth. You know what? I've used this service in Teledoc where you don't have to go to the doctor's office. You get on a video call or even an audio call if they don't have video, and you can actually speak to a doctor. And for many of the normal, usual daily bumps and kind of colds, though today there is no normal cold, but you use a Teledoc and they can prescribe medicine for you, or they can tell you what else you need to do. And now with everyone working from home with quarantine, and you don't want to go to a doctor's office if you might be infecting other people, more and more people are relying on telehealth services. And it's not just doctors, it's all kinds of medical technicians. And another example of why we can't have nice things, as this becomes more popular, it becomes more of a target for the I'm just wanted to close a window here. It becomes more of a target for the cyber criminals to attack, and so there's an article up there, COVID-19 response following best telehealth security practices, that I think you should take a look at. It is it's an important thing, and something that needs focusing on. So that's on Security Boulevard. Also on Security Boulevard, in a similar vein, protecting healthcare data and infrastructure. Now more than ever, it's important that we lock down, as best as possible, our healthcare data and infrastructure. Doctors and health professionals need it, but it's not a great time for data breaches and ransomware, especially as it relates to our health infrastructure. So again, it's up on Security Boulevard, protecting healthcare data and infrastructure. Please have a look at that one. Another article I wanted to bring up is over on DevOps.com, and it was actually up a day or two ago. It's by Mike Vizard. It's CompuWare shifts mainframe app testing left. CompuWare has sort of been the down and dirty boy in the mainframe business now for a couple of years. Chris O'Malley and his team really kind of just pushing the envelope on what it means to do mainframe in DevOps and agile and in today's environments. And of course, recently CompuWare was acquired by BMC, but they're still innovating over there and still doing stuff. So good article by Mike on what CompuWare has up their sleeve and what they're coming out with now. And then lastly, I wanted to focus on one of my DevOps chats that is now published up on DevOps.com, and that is a conversation I had with Daniel Spoonhour, better known as Spoons. Daniel's one of the original Google team members with microservices and so forth, and him and a few other members of that team started a company called Lightstep a couple of years ago. They recently announced some funding, but more importantly, they put out a new release, which really kind of pushes the bar higher. If you are developing or operating in a microservices environment, I definitely check out what Spoons and the team at Lightstep are doing. Have a listen to the podcast. If you don't want to, on DevOps.com, you can read it with the transcript, so you could read along. But if not, you can listen to the sound file, the podcast, on SoundCloud or iTunes or Spotify or whatever your favorite medium is for listening to podcasts. I definitely have you recommend that. I also wanted to point out, I'm not sure if it'll be on DevOps.com or Security Boulevard, but there's another good podcast I did with the folks at White Hat about the state of open source security vulnerabilities. And with so much of us using open source software and open source software components in our applications, some good facts and figures and data and metrics in there that I'd highly recommend. Lastly, I wanted to bring up an article that I hope will have you guys thinking. And that is, it's up on Container Journal, which deals with cloud native, Kubernetes, containers, Docker, so forth. And the post is entitled, "Is Docker Meeting Its Promises Made Last Year?" And for those of you probably already know, last year was sort of a pivotal year for Docker. They jettisoned a lot of the open source, kind of the container itself, and a lot of what they were doing to really focus on a core set of products and solutions that the new Docker would go forward on and achieve some sort of independence, right? The Docker Enterprise Technology Platform was given up to was sold to Mirantis, and Docker had a sort of a three-part structure for its road ahead plan: build, share, and run. And I don't want to read the article word for word, but you should guys go have a look and let's see a year later where Docker is on that. Look, you know what, Docker for really, in many ways, kind of define the modern container infrastructure and movement that we see. I mean, Kubernetes, of course, inherited it, but Docker was the progenitor of it, and I wish them nothing but success in what they have going on. So have a look at the article and check that out. As I said, there's always lots of news and content coming out on our Media Ops site. Welcome you to check it out. And we'll have, we try to put a little bit of news in like this on every TechStrong Day segment, on every TechStrong TV segment, episode. So we'll have more next time. But until then, this is Alan Schimmel. And now back to the rest of our programming.
Thanks, Alan. Back in November, I had the chance to attend the DevOps Enterprise Summit in Las Vegas with the Digital Anarchist crew. Had some really, really great conversations there about DevOps, compliance, DevSecOps, and so many more. One of the conversations I had was with Kate Neef and John Rezatarsky, who both are with PNC, and they had a discussion there during the event on compliance. And we had a chance to speak about the presentation that they offered and got a couple takeaways from the discussion, including the fact that DevOps is actually helping PNC be more compliant by including risk actually within the development process so that everybody had a place at the table, so to speak. Lots of great insight, and I want to go ahead and run that interview for you now. So enjoy. Thanks.
This is Digital Anarchist at DevOps Enterprise Summit, Las Vegas, 2019.
Welcome back. As always, thanks for joining me again at the DevOps Enterprise Summit in Las Vegas, 2019. This is Charlene O'Hanlon. I'm the moderator for this interview, and I'm the managing editor over at Media Ops. Having some great conversations. We're nearing the end of the first day. We have 2 more days of conversations to be had, but right now I want to go ahead and get into our next conversation, which is with Kate Neef and John Rezatarsky.
You got it right.
Yeah, from PNC Bank. And I know you guys were talking compliance earlier today in a presentation that you gave. So tell us a little bit about, first tell us about yourselves, what you guys do, and then tell us a little bit about the presentation.
Sure. So I lead PNC's Dojo practice, and that's where we bring teams to come in to learn about new capabilities that we're introducing and focus on challenges or problems that they have.
And I'm the director of the in the infrastructure services group, and running kind of all things DevOps-ish. Okay. I guess is the way I would say.
All right, great. Well, I know compliance is important, obviously, in the DevOps process, because it's certainly something you don't want to leave behind, especially in financial services. So tell me a little bit about your discussion earlier today, your presentation about that, and we'll kind of go from there as far as what DevOps teams can do to kind of keep compliance top of mind for them.
So in the DevOps community, there's so many different great practices that you can just take into your own organization. But when you're a highly regulated financial services organization, there's definitely a lot of extra spotlight into things like new tools or new processes or even automation. And really trying to break down that we've done it this way and this is the way we've always done it, it can be quite challenging because lots of times there's processes and policies and procedures that have to change in order for you to really start breaking through. But I think one of the best things that we've been able to accomplish at PNC, and especially a little bit in short order, is for us to be able to say that we can actually do it more accurately. We could do it with better security, and we could do it with true traceability and full traceability across the entire process, and really be able to give that back to our regulators, give that back to risk, and ultimately where we really want to go, which is where we closed with in our talk today, was giving risk a seat at the table, right? And making sure that they're part of the process, and that if anything is ever going to change, they're gonna have to agree to it, and that hopefully embodies ultimately what we want from a continuous compliance standpoint. But in order for us to be able to start changing our behaviors effectively, not just saying things, but actually doing things, that's where Kate kind of comes in with the dojo.
So we bring teams and work side by side with them, and as we're introducing new capabilities and really approach that improves the fidelity of our risk management practices, we help introduce those in a way that shows how it's easier for people to do their work. They get an understanding and also the support that they need. And so we're reinforcing how to do things faster, but also in a way that's safe and ensures we're doing things the right way.
Okay, so how did you guys kind of back into the whole compliance issue? Was it something that as you implemented DevOps and you were noticing your teams kind of getting into it, that was compliance just kind of being left out of the conversation, or
I would argue it's the latter, right? Like actually we were really good at it.
Oh, okay.
So we were actually trying to take a strength and focus in on that strength, and have that as a driving factor for helping be able to release DevOps. And I think that's because at the end of the day, we've been able to grow as an organization during while other banks haven't. And the reason was because of the way we approached things like risk. And so we wanted to be able to take that strength and embody that as a what was my word today? Vehicle of enablement, essentially, right? Within the dojo to say, hey, we could show teams how to do better things, better ways, and it's going to ideally help move the time to market, as well as the speed to market of building new services for our customers.
Okay, all right. Kate, have you, working with the different DevOps teams, are there certain kind of aspects to including compliance or enabling compliance, if you will, that folks kind of, need to keep in mind or that you've seen?
So I think it's understanding the why behind some of the compliance checks, right? Often people may know that they have to do things, but they don't understand the intent behind it and alternatives. So one of the things that we're working on at the end of this month is to introduce new procedures, right? That actually, to John's point, strengthen controls that we have in place now and make it easier for teams to actually be more nimble and move, but faster. However, they're also still making sure that we mitigate any of the potential risk events that could surface.
Okay. So I imagine because you have a number of different teams doing a number of different projects that there's going to be some overlap here and there. And have you run into any issues where something one team is doing is kind of killing the compliance for another team?
I don't know if we've run into that specific scenario, but I think what John hit on is really important before in terms of understanding all of the risks and different exposure that we face and making sure that teams have awareness into that. So one of the things we're advocating for is strengthening the partnership and engagement model with our risk partners, right? So that they're engaged in a way that's sustainable and manageable, given we're increasing the pace of change and there's a large number of teams. But how can we strengthen that so that there's good ways for them to highlight, risks and things that we should be aware of, and then we make it easier for the teams to be able to implement and respond to some of those needs.
Okay. Working with third parties, third-party partners, whatever. I'm thinking about like the credit score folks, like the credit bureaus and things.
Sure.
I imagine that their relationship to your organization must be very tightly integrated. And so how has that impacted their or your DevOps processes when it comes to working with third parties?
So it's actually a fantastic question, and we actually hit on it a little bit when we talk about things like our tightly coupled architectures. And even if it's a off-the-shelf product that would be third-party or a SaaS type of solution, the biggest thing we have to do, and I think one of the biggest DevOps tenets is to be able to protect your application from some of those things that are outside of your control and building abstraction into those services. So that it still gives you that ability to release in a safe manner without having to impact, some of those third-party services. And so what we talked about today was our real big focus around APIs and building APIs and using APIs as not just an ability to deliver great capabilities in a small fashion so that we can deploy efficiently, but also using APIs as an abstraction tier as well.
So funny because I was just going to ask you about APIs and how you guys are using APIs to kind of advance the DevOps toolchain and your relationship. So has that increased over the last, year or so, that your use of APIs, or is it something that, will you be seeing more increased use of?
I think absolutely. I don't know how you feel, but I think it's actually been the last couple years.
Yeah.
In fact, we have these coding challenges that are called API Fests. And it's really great because we typically focus on one theme, and that theme might be a specific business unit. Maybe it's asset management, or maybe it's retail banking. But as you're building out these hackathons, which we call API Fests, you're allowing any development team from any other organization to be able to contribute ideas and come back to actually be able to code during these API fests. And I love the fact that we call it API Fest because I think it really hits home the point of, hey, you know what? We're building modern messaging, modern ways to build messaging systems within the enterprise.
And it's not a lockdown proprietary system that
It's not a lockdown proprietary. Yes,
yeah,
fantastic.
That's great. So, what about security though? When we're talking about APIs, because just especially in financial services, I mean, you guys have to be so super, worried about security.
Yeah.
So, does that conversation ever come into play with APIs?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Authentication, authorization, encryption, all must-haves, and those are highly checked within every piece of or every process within our development lifecycle. And so it's once again though, it's another thing that we're looking to build more automation into. So rather than have to engage separate teams, we want to be able to let people declaratively identify what security they would like to use, or and let the things like the pipeline and let things like our automation take over and make it more accurate, but then still make sure that we have the right approval processes in place to ensure that we have the right security for all of the different systems. But absolutely.
Excellent. So I imagine, speaking of security, DevSecOps is probably a very large part of your conversation as well. Kate, what do you, when you're interacting with your different DevOps teams, what kinds of conversations are you having around security and DevOps?
So we're working more closely with our security function, right, and to determine how we can, I think, strengthen security practices, bring some of that up earlier and happening, early in the stages of deployments where it's not a check in after the fact right now, which is some of the sort of legacy approach that we had that we're shifting, and also how can that organization get closer to us and embed within those teams. So, is our security organizations maturing, conversations on how we continue to fortify that relationship.
So I think one thing that that Kate's Dojo has done an amazing job of is these teams are coming in. They're also the first one to utilize some of the automation services and security scanning, and are really around that code analysis. And even if it can't be done in minutes, we can, Kate's team can easily, their coaches can work with the teams to set up maybe asynchronous pipelines that are still going to serve that, so we can get that information back as soon as possible. So it's definitely an important focus within the dojo as well.
That's great. So I had an idea and it just ran right out of my head. Moving forward, where do you guys see your DevOps kind of environment moving, and what do you guys see for yourselves in the next year or so?
I think
tough one, I know. It's like a future.
I think it's continuing to help more teams across the organization. We're definitely working with the businesses more closely on strategic initiatives and efforts that they have. So to try to figure out how we can set things up out the gate, in the right way. I think we're continuing to advance, capabilities that we're offering and developing within our own team, and building partnerships with shared services across the enterprise.
Absolutely.
So then, we've been talking with a couple different organizations today about the concept of value stream management. And is that something that you guys are looking at also?
We are. Yeah. So in specific areas, I think when we first started, we definitely took teams and organizations based on how they were set up today. And we're trying to really understand, especially in areas where we can set up a blank canvas and really understand how we can optimize the structure of those teams, where some of the bottlenecks are, and then provide recommendations. And there are several areas across the bank that are interested in doing that.
Great.
Yeah.
Now, I imagine that you guys have some metrics also that you're looking at to measure customer experience, customer success, and at the end of the day, it's really, that's what it's all about, is making sure that you keep your customers happy. So have you noticed any kind of trends with your implementation of DevOps and any impact on that customer experience? I mean, the numbers don't lie, so what are you seeing?
So it really depends on teams. So some are looking at net promoter score based on product or experience that they offer to customers. They're getting feedback from quality of the product, how fast they can test features and changes and iterate on those going forward. And then overall, we're looking at stability and our response time to incidents.
And maybe you might want to hit on the credit card project as a before and after, which might be a good representation.
Right. So today we talked about a team last year that we worked with, a portfolio, I should say, and they were trying to bring a brand new credit card product to market. And that work at the time transcended 8 different teams. It required coordination across 5 different segments of the business. Wow. And entailed 48 system interactions. And so over the past year, and we worked together with them to restructure their teams, bring them into the dojo. They spent several weeks with us this summer, and they were actually the first team at PNC to change the way they deploy code to leverage trunk-based development and GitOps. And they're actually using an iterative approach to rolling that product out. So starting with customers within the enterprise and also extending out to different cohorts afterwards before we go to market with a larger segment.
That's great. That's
yeah.
great.
I mean, they were, the reason I just feel great about them is because when they're in the dojo and they're working on their sprints, they have something to release within every sprint that is large, in fact. And so it's just a great story.
That's great. That's really great. So, I guess when we're talking about compliance, when we're talking about, I'm thinking mostly about like government compliance, FINRA, or not FINRA, but I'm sorry, I'm just completely blanking on the financial regulations. There's a lot of them. But how quickly are you guys able to pivot to meet those mandates as they come through, and how quickly do you have to change because compliance is changing? It doesn't seem to be sitting still.
No.
Right. I can't even remember the names anymore.
Are you talking about the one in Europe at this point?
Well, there's that one. There's GDPR, but there's the California compliance regulations, but then there's also Sarbanes-Oxley, and there's all these other ones that are all floating around.
FISMA.
And exactly, that's what I was thinking of. Not FINRA. I just did.
Anyway, FINRA would be another one.
Yeah. But it seems like there are so many different ones, and they're just kind of flying at us, and between just regular compliance and regulatory issues, and then privacy issues, and this and that, and it just seems like you guys have so many balloons in the air that you have to pull down and hold on to at the same time to make sure that you're completely compliant. I mean, that's got to be a really, really tough thing, especially when you're doing DevOps.
Yeah, but it's also a really good reason for DevOps, right? I mean, if you think about as you add more products and you add more load, you typically have to add, the old mentality was you have to add more operational teams, right? You have to add more people, you have to add more staff. But then, I think, Google is a great story that basically says, well, that doesn't work. So what you have to do is start treating things completely differently. And so what they did in the SRE space was say, hey, operations is a software problem. And that's the fundamental belief. And I think it's a very similar story when it comes to exactly what we're talking about here, which is, hey, look, we know that we're always going to have compliance changes, but at the scale that we have to handle it, we can't stand up new teams to do these, to manage these and govern these every day, throughout the year. So how do we do it? And I think that's the best part about DevOps is, well, we're trying to treat it like a software problem, because if we can treat it like a software problem, we can build it, we can measure it, we can scale it, and then we can move on to the next one. And that gives us the scale that we need in order to meet the demand that's actually happening in the industry.
Okay. Just seems like there's, with so many compliance issues that are out there today and mandates, and there are varying degrees. Like GDPR is different from the California Data Privacy Act, or whatever it's called, CDMA, and it's almost mind-boggling to me as a consumer. So you as a company having to meet all of those different compliance compliance regulations, and each one is just different enough that you can't just do like a blanket solution. So how do you address that when each of the compliance regulations, each one is different and there are varying degrees, and there might even be situations in which one is in conflict with another? Have you come up with something? Had that situation before?
Yeah. I mean, so I think we're on the brink of that right now. Our company has been expanding nationally on the retail banking front right now. And so that's the conundrum that you just described is one they're balancing in terms of products in different markets. And it's not an easy one, and I think it's with close partnership with our risk and compliance partners. And I think the ability to quickly address and make changes, we've put ourselves in a stronger position, but being able, now that we're introducing DevOps practices to the enterprise.
All right, well, I don't envy you all your position. It's pretty, it's convoluted, to say the least, for me, and that's why I'm a journalist, I guess. So, but
I think you have to look at it a different way, which is it's a challenge, and that's the way that we love to look at it, and we love accomplishing challenges.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you both so much for imparting your knowledge on this. Compliance is one of those situations or those topics that it'll always kind of swirl over my head a little bit too much. So, but I'm so glad that you guys are working it hard there at PNC. So thank you so much for that.
Okay.
So thanks for the discussion. I enjoyed it. So
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
just want to remind the audience that today's event is just one of 3 days worth of events conversations. So please join us tomorrow and Wednesday as well for lots of great interviews, lots of conversations. And you can also see all of the interviews streaming live on digitalanarchist.live. Also on YouTube, Facebook, and the DevOps.com Container Journal and Security Boulevard sites, as well as YouTube. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with another interview.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community: digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Okay, thanks, Charlene. Great interview. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Up next on TechStrong TV is, again, one of our regular segments. It's Mitchell Ashley from the Accelerated Strategies Group, and he's here at the Analyst Corner. Mitchell, take it away.
Hi, Mitch Ashley, CEO with Accelerated Strategies Group. You know, there is tons of disruption, not news to any of you, I'm sure, that we're all living with. Today, as I'm doing this segment, we just got the newest numbers on jobless claims, just some shocking numbers, but also, I guess, how could you expect not when we're having everyone stay at home and so many people not working? But I want to talk about this from a couple of perspectives. And first, I want to say, you know, there is so much tragedy that's happening because of this COVID virus. And my heart goes out to any of us who are dealing with a sick family member, maybe someone who's very gravely sick, or even loss of a family member or friend. And it is happening. I mean, we have to acknowledge that. And whether it's happened in your family yet, it's probably happened to someone that you have a close connection to. and seems that it certainly will at some point. I hate to say that, but that's what the predictions are. And while that's had huge consequences to all of us in our businesses, with working from home just to being kind of the latest of those, yeah, it's also a time to really look at what disruption creates for us. Now, disruption in this case is being put onto all of us, not really by something we've done, but because of a virus. Has really changed fundamentally our businesses, how we're working, if we're working, all of those things. I mean, if you talk about disruption, that's disruption. And there are different responses, just as there is to business strategies when a competitor comes into the market, or an opportunity, an offensive opportunity comes where we might want to implement a disruptive business strategy ourselves in current or future markets, other markets. You know, COVID has caused this disruption, and the same kind of things are occurring. I mean, we're all working at home. It's a defensive strategy. It's a defensive reaction. It wasn't something that we planned to have so many people working from home. But at the same time, I've seen, even in just the local economy that I work in here, how some of our investments in technology, maybe even investments in digital strategies, are helping and actually coming to fruition. I talked about on a previous broadcast that I built a computer recently in my home, and it's something we've done for gaming computers. We've done that for years, so I'm comfortable and very familiar with doing that. Kind of enjoy it. Something my first son and I used to do. Actually, both my sons and I have done. But I needed a computer for some video work that we're doing, and I had ordered a computer from a major manufacturer, and it would have been the perfect thing of what I needed, but it happened to get delayed multiple times because of the shipping priorities that are happening to get essential goods to us from our suppliers, Amazon and others. And so it's the right thing to do, but should I wait for it to come? Maybe I'm waiting a month or two for this thing to show up. Hopefully not, but that certainly seemed the possibility of the number of delays that were happening. After doing a little bit of research, I happened to actually impromptu get an email notice from an electronics company, a retail company, we all know, Best Buy, saying that they had curbside pickup. And I know that they carry also components for computers. So not that this segment is about building computers and everyone's interested in doing that, but what stood out to me about that is I was able to, because I had one path blocked to me or delayed, I was able to do all the research online very quickly, find what products were in stock, what products I could go pick up. Turns out I could get everything I needed at two different locations where they were within reasonable distance, 4 miles from my house, kind of thing. And literally ordered everything that I needed, did curbside pickup, and was able to build it. But what enabled that wasn't just the email that I got. They were able to modify their systems. The systems that generated the email, their mobile app, and also the backend cloud system, so that when I arrived in the parking lot, no one could go in the stores any longer. But I could take that email or use the mobile app and click on a button and inform them of what my vehicle looked like, so they could bring out the purchases to my car. And so they had runners, kind of look like a restaurant, if you will. People bringing out products to everybody pulling up, buying things. And, they couldn't do that if they were not able to harness the technology that they've invested in to very rapidly make some changes and adjust their business process. So it's a good example of where I think in that case, technology actually served a company well to be able to respond. Now that's happening elsewhere. I mean, we could pick any number of places where it's, businesses are finding ways to thrive, finding ways at least to survive. I mean, the restaurant business is certainly one. And many have shifted to delivery only. That's their only option because they can't open their dining rooms that we would all go and enjoy a meal at. So of course, many have had to ramp up their business on pickup food services. Some didn't have that as a major part of their strategy or their business, but now it is. It's maybe the only path to revenue. And some have even taken it a step farther and created some new offerings. An example, there's a kind of trendy breakfast place in Colorado called Snooze. Actually, they're in multiple places. have a relative who works for them. And they, of course, very quickly ramped up their curbside pickup, those kind of things for takeout. But they also started offering new offerings. We've gotten some emails, for example, a BLT dinner or lunch and a fully packaged meal all ready to go, kind of like one of those companies that would send you meals in a box, but really this coming from a restaurant. So they've adjusted their offerings and figured out a way and are experimenting, like many people are, with what can we do that will be useful and valuable to people in a situation where they're not leaving their homes, or if they are, it's for very minimal things like picking up food or going to the grocery store. So it's this whole tragedy, and it breaks my heart that we're going through this. And having gone through other downturns with the Great Recession and 9/11, it takes a while, sometimes quite a while, for economies to rebound. You know, I listen to the politicians talking, and you know, this will all come back very soon. It's probably not going to happen that way. Certainly not as fast as we'd like it. I'm not trying to make any dire predictions. We have enough of those right now. But the thing that it will happen is new opportunities will be created. Now, I look at this from a business standpoint, but I also look at one of our responsibilities, and I know not all businesses follow this philosophy, but I think part of our social responsibility is employing and supporting people. That's part of our social contract with the people that we not only work with, but we live in our communities, whether they're in the same town or digitally across the country or the oceans and to other continents. And so I think about, I know many of you do, are thinking, you know, well, I don't want to take advantage of a bad situation, but on the other hand, I don't want to lose my business, or I want to find ways to be responsive to, you know, a disruptive situation, and what can we do? And then folks have moved things like conferences from in-person to online, and now looking at how do we make that an even more engaging experience. You know, organizations are trying to find what are the things that we can do to continue to build and in some cases just survive in case of a business. So I would encourage you as business leaders and technology leaders that now is the time for our digital transformation strategies, both business models and technology, to thrive and shine. And I do that not just to overlook the tragedy that's happening, but part of the outcome that will happen from this and every downturn is the outcome will happen, but the best opportunity is to create an outcome out of the rebuilding of the economy and businesses. And now's the time to move on that and really be progressively, actively thinking about and working on how do you transform your business. Maybe the way you offer your services today are not going to stay the same. Maybe that's gone. Maybe even that option isn't possible anymore. I think many organizations are going to look at having gone through this experience, and some will certainly say, why am I spending all this money on buildings when my workforce is able to productively work from their homes? Maybe that's not such a bad option. Maybe I should invest in helping them build better wireless capabilities in their home to have a better network, and invest in that instead of providing a desk and a coffee maker down the aisle, down the row from their cubicle. So there are going to be some things that are going to stay with us in how we've had to respond and react and shift and adjust to the current situation. And some of those can be very positive and create opportunities for us. I mean, even from a clean air, clean water, you've probably seen some of the reports in the news that we're now being able to see to the bottom of the ocean in the canals of Venice, which has never been possible since all the boats that are traveling over that. The dolphins have returned. Satellite photos of the reduced pollution. I know in my own house, we can go to where we go walking. There's a hill that we can walk up on, and I can see Denver crystal clear, like I never have been able to do. Denver's kind of been famous at times for its brown cloud, but I know all of us look through a lot of pollution as we kind of look in the sky. And frankly, it's very nice to see that. It's very nice to know that we're breathing that clean air. So whether you're kind of into that part of our world or not, there are good things that can come out of even great tragedies. And I know this is a very great tragedy that we're in the process of. I also believe it's our responsibility to look to the future. And while we're even in the midst of the crisis, while we're supporting our families, we're taking care of our loved ones, we're caring for the sick, we are reaching out and supporting each other. We're maybe making masks to help provide protective equipment for individuals as healthcare workers. We're doing things that help each other from a humanity standpoint, humanitarian. We can also do that from a business standpoint. And I don't mean just taking advantage, being profiteering off of trying to sell respirators for the highest bidder. But I mean, really think about transformative business strategies, technologies that can change and reshape and create a better future that we come out of from all of this, even with the tragedy that we are experiencing. If I speak to the technology side of the audience, here's your chance to shine. Here's your chance to demonstrate how adopting DevOps, or maybe drastically ramping up your adoption of DevOps or cloud technologies, cloud native, things that can help you deliver more responsiveness to the business. That's why the business is investing in all that, not just because they love technology and they want to be in the cloud. Yeah, sometimes it's cost savings, but from a digital transformation standpoint, businesses need to be able to defensively respond to threats. And if there's ever been a threat, this is certainly one, a great one, as well as offensive strategies, stepping up, stepping into markets, stepping into new markets, stepping into bad situations and creating some positive things out of it. So the technology leaders can really rally the troops around responding to an opportunity, like building a mobile app or expanding your mobile app to now offer services in a way that you've never offered them before, or maybe new services. We can really demonstrate the value of the money that we've spent and continue to invest in technology and the cloud and people and training and approaches like DevOps. So I highly encourage you to think about the upside of this, the positive side, and how technology can enable the future that we want to be a part of when kind of cloud of all this starts to lift. And of course, from a business standpoint, I believe we have a social responsibility. A part of employing people is taking care of people. They aren't just units that produce work. At least certainly I don't believe that. Though I know some businesses are very kind of cold and crass about that. And there is a financial part to it. I understand. We all know that. But there's also a human side of it. And I think it's our responsibility to do our best to both take care of people, but also create opportunities for them, whether they're currently in our companies, contracting or as employees, or as we create new kinds of services and respond to threats. There's opportunity for other people to thrive in that as well, not just for us to make money. I know that's important to our shareholders, to our owners, and us as a business. It's certainly what enables employment and being able to give people jobs. There are going to be a lot of people looking for work. We may need to adjust how we employ people. Maybe you take advantage of the gig economy much more proactively than you have in the past. A lot of people are unemployed, looking for work. They're probably going to look for new ways of working, or at least getting some kind of work. And I think that's certainly one path to it. And investing in education. This is a great time to invest in yourself, invest in others with training. There's all kinds of great things. I know in the DevOps world, there's the DevOps Institute, and there's all kinds of great trainings, even a great masterclass service now that's offered that our family enjoys. Some great things there with music and business and cooking and lots of really good things that help invest in you and you as a leader to be able to not only lead your people, but lead yourself. Lead as someone who's whole and who's positive and who's creating a future for you, your business, and your people. So I'd love to hear from you. If you have ideas and things that have happened, worked, suddenly there's been an opportunity creative out of this crisis, not necessarily going to share all those things. Some of them may be confidential, but I appreciate anyone reaching out to me. You can reach me at mitchell@accelst.com. It's my Accelerated Strategies email address. And I also encourage you to go to our site. There's all kinds of free content that are great to follow, TechStrong TV being one of them. Also, I wanted to let you know that we are introducing something new into the segment. Accelerated Strategies launched a survey, some research that we started when this COVID crisis just started to hit, really about a month and a half ago, almost 2 months ago now. At the time we created the survey, we're being really cautious of, we don't want to look like we're, carpetbaggers here, or jumping on and taking advantage of a bad situation. We want to be very respectful. So a lot of our initial research was, how would you respond to a situation that we're frankly already in, not knowing that that was going to happen in a matter of weeks. So we've gotten some really good data from that research, but we've also pivoted, and we're now doing some research through flash polls, kind of quick polls, quick surveys. And you'll see some of those things on not only the Accelerated Strategy site, but places like devops.com. We'd love to have you participate in those. And we've been doing some testing. They've done a few polls already to see how this works. But what we're going to be doing is, at a minimum, we'll take one of those per week, introduce it on a Monday, and also do some kind of advertising, or what you want to call it, to let you know that's out and available. And love to have you participate in that. Yes, we'd love the research and we'd love the information. It's all private. We're not capturing any personal information, is what I'm saying. But we also want to share that and also do some kind of real-time analysis, as well as some background work. So we're going to be talking about some of the survey results as part of TechStrong TV, which I really look forward to. I mean, for example, we did a quick poll on, rank what is the most important technology you are relying on in this remote work at home environment today. And it wasn't just email. Matter of fact, email wasn't even the top thing. I'll kind of leave it there. We'll share some more of those results, but we've really shifted in the way we've worked already, not just location, but how we communicate. And I think there's some of those things will stick with us for a long time, maybe become the new normal. So I look forward to doing those segments with you and sharing some of that information. We also, as I announced earlier, are leading the track of DevOps World, something new, a leadership track called Software Delivery Leadership Forum. So if you're interested in presenting at that, or you're interested in attending, love to have you participate. And you can go to devopworld.com and find out more information about registering. Currently, it's set up as an in-person event in September. And I know, like all conferences, that's being evaluated on a day-by-day basis, could become a virtual event as well. Either way, I'm pretty confident that will happen, and we'd love to have you join us. Love to have you speak if you're someone in a product leader, business leader, technology leader, because we're going to be taking more than just a highly technical look at this. Some things I talked about earlier in this broadcast that we'll be examining. So look forward to that. And we have some research that we're going to be announcing and sharing with you at that time as well. Thank you for joining me.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
Hi, welcome to the podcast. This is Mitch Ashley, CEO with Accelerated Strategies Group, and I'm joined by Bob Resselman, who's an analyst and software expert with Accelerated Strategies. Bob, good to have you on the podcast. Good to be on
Hey.
here together.
Thanks for inviting me again. I'm always happy to be here.
Well, it's kind of funny. I don't know if we all work together and do podcasts, so it's kind of fun. I don't know if you're a guest or a regular or what, but.
Right. I could be the Ed McMahon to, your usual stuff. Here's Mitch.
You'll have to perfect the laugh at my dumb jokes then.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, the Ed McMahon laugh. There you go.
Exactly. So we want to get into, we love talking about software architectures and one of the areas of your specialty. And of course, there's this topic about Docker. Is there anything moving beyond Docker? So let me kind of tee it up that way. What are your thoughts of, is Docker it, or is there something else we're moving towards after Docker?
Well, thanks for bringing it up. I'm going to bring up a quote I just read from Solomon Hykes, who is one of the technologists that actually created Docker. And he said, if we had WebAssembly back in 2008, we would not have any need to create Docker. He said that, and he said that recently, and I started thinking about that. So, of course, I started scurrying around and started researching WebAssembly and trying to understand it better. And it turns out that there might very well be something other than Docker in our universe. Now, granted, there's, Docker has, it is a game changer. It's really gone beyond the virtual machine. The Docker daemon allows a lot of process isolation, and you can't run something like Kubernetes without a container orchestration technology or a container runtime like Docker. However, Docker is not the only container runtime. The CNCF survey is reporting that Containerd is getting a lot more play these days. And so there is going to be containers because, first of all, there's a container orchestration technology. However, it is not the only means by which to create process isolation.
Well, you mentioned WebAssembly, and that's kind of a new emerging, right? Can you give us a kind of a working person's definition of that?
WebAssembly has been around for a while. It's been on the browser side. So what WebAssembly allows you to do, it allows you to run binary code in a client-side WebAssembly virtual machine. So the binary code gets brought into this virtual machine, which is on your browser. All the major browsers support it. Chrome, Firefox, Safari, none of the IEs did, but Edge does, the Microsoft Edge. And it brings the binary code right in and runs it in the browser. So you can either have the binary code already embedded in your web page as binary, and I could show you examples of that, or you can download it. And the typical fashion is to download it, and it runs wicked fast. It runs much faster than JavaScript does, and it lives in a sandbox environment very similar to the way JavaScript does. And the reason people like WebAssembly is it just brings so much more power to the browser experience. You can play games, all this video stuff that goes on in the browser, like when you're doing video in browser and all that stuff, that's all run through WebAssembly. And it's isolated, and it's isolated on a per process basis. And what we're seeing now is we're starting to see some migration of WebAssembly architecture, this binary, onto the server side. And I was at a talk last week where Microsoft now has a product, a framework called Blazor. And Blazor allows developers to write code that can execute either on the client or on the server. Now, you might say, oh, this is the old day of view state and all that early ASP.NET stuff and all that. And no, it's much different. The way it works is that it creates what's called a WebSocket, a SignalR WebSocket. So you have a continuous connection between the client and the server. And the client can be doing a whole lot of computation over here and just going out to the server for data. Or the client can be doing callbacks into the server for specific algorithms, and that becomes very powerful. But forget Blazor. Not forget Blazor. They're going to get some real attention out of it. But this means that running server-side WebAssembly becomes a viable technique for getting fast execution of code in an isolated process.
Well, interesting. It's sort of an analog to what's happened with JavaScript and Node.js, right? It's gone from the scripting language, and of course, WebAssembly being a compiled object, if you will, something that's now moving to the server. So already familiar to people that are doing app development, web app development.
Right. The difference now, how do you bring that up? The difference with excuse me, Node.js is Node.js still uses the V8 JavaScript runtime. Okay, and so that lives on the browser and also lives on the server now, so it's sort of there. But JavaScript is not binary code. JavaScript is text-based, and there's some hocus pocus that goes on. And of course, you have people have taken JavaScript that made it objective using TypeScript and stuff like that, object-oriented. But where it becomes really powerful, and what you're onto, is that you write WebAssembly in binary languages, such as C++, C, or Rust. Not, and they're saying, yes, there is a compiler now that will convert .NET C# into WebAssembly, and I'm sure there's probably a Java flavor out there, but you really want those binary bits because those are fast execution. And that's going to be, this has legs. This has legs. It's not going to be, are we going to see like a dramatic change the way remember it took Docker, jeepers, was it 2015? I forget the date, but it took Docker about 5 years to catch on. And it wasn't really until it was picked up by the Kubernetes ecosystem that it really had mass proliferation. You had Docker Swarm and stuff. So you're going to see more work being done on the server side in WebAssembly, and it's going to take a while to propagate, but I don't think it's going to go away. And once they get the orchestration technologies in place, like, let's face it, containers really took off once you had Kubernetes orchestrating the container ecosystem and putting services in front of those containers under pods, and you had all that conversation going places. Now, if they can come up with a orchestration management technology for WebAssembly, that becomes a viable alternative to Docker, because you can run it on the client or you can run it on the server. And that's a compelling argument.
Now, does WebAssembly, and excuse me if this is an easy question I should know the answer to, does WebAssembly have very similar constructs and structures to containers?
It's a specification.
With
Yes, it's a W3C specification.
Okay.
There are different implementations, but it's W3C all the way. Yeah.
So if you're familiar already with Docker, or you're already working in WebAssembly, it's a familiar
if you're working
structure.
Right, there's a thing. You have to go out and check the spec. But if you're working WebAssembly on the client, you're done. I mean, it's done. You're not done, but you have a definite head start. Hello, all you people that want to move over to the client and make an impact. Move over to the server and make an impact. But they have the other technology or framework we're seeing emerge now is called WASI, W-A-S-I, which is WebAssembly Systems Interface, which is a standard by which to interface WebAssembly binaries into these operating system. And once you're in the operating system, it's good news, bad news. I mean, there's always people say, oh, now I have more binaries and I'm running binaries and I have all this security problem going on and stuff. Well, that's been there anyway. I mean, you have the same security problem with the containers. I mean, the security problems are there. It's a problem that has to be solved. And as WebAssembly gets more traction, the industry will come up with security solutions. It's too good an opportunity to miss. But so I guess I was a little circuitous. I got lost in WebAssembly land. I tend to happen when I go in there, yeah.
A little bit of a softball question, but there's clearly some pretty big names behind WebAssembly. So it's not like something that's just kind of came out of the blue, right?
I was at Google. I was at Google I/O 2 years ago. That's when they had Google I/O before they canceled it this summer. But I was at Google I/O 2 years ago, and they had a number of sessions about client-side WebAssembly. And they were really cramming WebAssembly into the clients, particularly Android, because if you take a look at the evolution of machine learning and artificial intelligence and the existing side by side with the maturity of cell phone technology, it's just so powerful now. They're cramming so much algorithm into those cell phones that they really need those WebAssembly binaries to get this. They don't need them, but they're leveraging the standalone cell phone, the standalone disconnected cell phone, to do more computing, particularly around translate and stuff. So all that work has been going on for years. And now it's coming to significant maturity and significant robustness. And the migration path could very well be, okay, now we're going to move it over to the server, or the server over here. Yeah, we're going to see some action in there.
Very much fits our edge compute, right? I mean,
Yep.
cell phones,
yeah.
smartphones, hugely powerful devices.
Better yet, imagine all those red light cameras now with WebAssembly algorithms embedded, and they can actually, instead of having to make all that network trip back and forth between the network and stuff, to say, let's say that you were looking for, this is dramatic, but let's say you had an Amber Alert, and you knew the Amber Alert and you knew the license plate. All you need to do is, in every red light camera in the grid, you just need to inject that license plate into the client-side intelligence, and then that camera can actually say, I found the car. It doesn't have to go back into the grid to figure out if that's the car I need to find. And it can report the location.
Interesting.
It is. It's fascinating.
Is there a high degree of portability between client and the server then, between WebAssembly? Obviously, what it's doing makes a difference, but
yeah, I can't speak to that intelligently.
Okay.
Can my dishwasher run in my bedroom? Well, I guess if I had the right plumbing.
Don't know. It may be an applicable question, may not be.
No, it's something worth researching. Portability comes in because if you start building helper components, presently in containers or in Kubernetes, we have this notion of sidecar containers that bring in additional services to help out other processes that are going on. So we might get a notion of transferable sidecar WebAssemblies or helper WebAssembly components. In terms of DevOps, though, it's not, this is very picayune down at the developer level, but in terms of DevOps, I think it's significant in the sense that I'm not hearing a whole lot of conversations around the notion of server-side development activity in the DevOps space. I'm hearing a lot about how do we, CI/CD, security, best practices, agile, how do we culture and all that stuff. But I'm going to make a dramatic statement. I'm going to say that the DevOps discussion is 5 years behind where the development discussion is now.
Well, I wouldn't disagree with that necessarily, because software architecture is on its own evolution path, right?
Right.
As well as what DevOps is doing in terms of the tool chain, pipeline, all of that kind of thing. So in some way, they're not mutually exclusive, but you can see them operating at different speeds, paces, maturity level.
Right. And what's that saying to me? It's not that they're exclusive, but that there's a tendency. There's a tendency in any sort of new way of thinking to try to revert to the old way of thinking.
Yeah, apply it to what you know, right?
Right, and so where that comes out to for me is I think about I think about MongoDB. I'm a MongoDB, and document-centric databases changed the way we do data management. It changed everything. It allowed a lot of stuff that couldn't happen before to happen. But one of the things that was missing under MongoDB was this notion of transactions. Every database analyst and database engineer, database admin, all that, they're all used to working with transactions. I want to open, make the sale, close, do that.
SQL type, yeah.
Right, and transactions are important and they're useful, and they're part of the day-to-day work of database developers. However, there's an argument, which I support, that really the notion of transactions are sort of not in the scope of a document-centric database, because why would you really want to have them? It sort of violates the spirit, okay? And that's my opinion. There are people out there that disagree with me. But because the database developers needed the transactions, which are an important part of their vocabulary, needed transactions to be present, they forced the document-centric industry to adding transactions. And so thus we get this tendency to go backward, right? We shouldn't really have transactions on document-centric databases. They should be standalone, hierarchical, blah, 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 blah. And what's happened in DevOps, the initial spirit of DevOps was, kumbaya. It really was. If the problem is there is no more dev, there is no more ops, our need for speed is such we all have to live at the same campfire. And we all have to be able to at least talk a common language and have a common sensibility that's going to allow us to move forward together. All right. And that's my understanding. And that's the spirit I support. But what's still happening now, when I hear the term like DevOps engineer, I always, I chuckle. Like, that's like transactions in document-centric databases. Why are we doing that? Right? Because a lot of hiring people that hire these sort of people, they have trouble conceptualizing the notion of a DevOps-enabled world. They have no problem understanding, oh, I might need system admins that can do CI/CD and have some good notions and understanding of distributed security. I get that. So I guess I can hire something called the DevOps engineer, which is really what I'm calling a systems admin who has these other capabilities. But I can hire to that. I can conceptualize that and hire around it. It's sort of antithetical to DevOps. DevOps is we all do this thing together. And so that bifurcation or that separation is happening, and it's a danger. I'm not going to say it's a real danger. And as a result, the developers are just living in their own world. It's, you go to Google I/O, there's you don't hear a lot about CI/CD in the tool chain, and then you go to other things, you're not hearing development. And now people are just they're moving further apart, and developers are moving way ahead.
Well, interesting. I'm glad you brought that up as a kind of statement or hypothesis or opinion, maybe something we can explore in other ways too. So going back to software architecture around the WebAssembly world and what's happening, moving that to the server side, are there any great resources people can look into, follow, kind of understand what's happening in this movement?
Well, read the specification.
The W3?
W3 specification, and if we can put this in links wherever we do it, we can put it in, make the link available. And then the other thing to do is there's a lot of open, GitHub is our friend, and there's a boatload of stuff on GitHub about beginner stuff and usage. I took the dive to learn Rust. All right, I'm not a Go. You could write them in Go too. Go is very WebAssembly happy, very friendly, but I'm taking the time to learn Rust and to start writing WebAssembly stuff in Rust. There's a boatload of compilers out there for WebAssembly. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, and I can maybe we can put, if you want, I can send you some links to put at the end of this conversation that people can see and pursue it. It's not something you do in 5 minutes. It really, you need to devote
I think that'd be great. We can share some resources for folks who would like some additional information, want to follow what's happening on this. Well, great, interesting conversation. Really enjoyed the time together in the podcast, and hopefully this is something we'll explore a lot more in the future.
Yes, it's not going to go away, and it's something we need to pay attention to.
The good thing about software architectures is it never stops evolving. So
never stops.
We live in a fascinating world.
Yes.
Well, thanks a lot, Bob.
Okay, thanks for having me.
You bet.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right. Thanks, Mitchell, for a great analyst corner today, as well as a great, video interview that we're sharing. I hope you guys are finding all of this interesting, relevant, helping pass the day away as you're working from home, or maybe you are still one of the few working in your office. We'll be back. This wraps up our first week of coverage for TechStrong TV. We're not going to broadcast on Saturday and Sunday, though the on-demand versions from all week are available. But we'll be back here Monday morning for a fresh week of TechStrong TV on the Digital Anarchist Network. This is Alan Schimmel from Media Ops. Have a great, safe weekend, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you all on Monday.